Welcome back to the Art and Skill of Coaching, where I teach you how to coach. And today we're going to be talking about something that a lot of new coaches never expect to navigate, and that is sales. And we're also going to be breaking down why your ability to sell is directly tied to your ability to coach. Now, I know a lot of coaches get into this field because they want to help people, not because they want to run a business, but the moment you become a coach, you also become an entrepreneur. And entrepreneurs must know how to market and sell. But an issue I see all the time is that a lot of coaches don't realize that sales is an actual skill set, that if you don't have it, you do need to learn it, or that they have this deep and negative association or unnecessary aversion to selling. And I know this because I've had this conversation with so many coaches inside of ASC, the Art and Skill of Coaching, and they told me things like they're afraid to be pushy, or that they don't want to seem money driven, or that they just want to help, they don't want to sell. And although these beliefs are altruistic, they don't help the coach or the client. Why? Because your sales process, and hear this, is the very first place transformation begins for your coaching client, not the first call. Let me break this down real quick. We're going to cover it in depth in today's podcast episode, but a clean, supportive, and seamless sales process begins to build trust. It's going to create emotional safety, which is necessary for change. It's going to help the client start to work through the fear and the vulnerability of investing in themselves and prioritizing themselves, and allows them to take the first courageous step towards change. And if your sales process is messy, apologetic, you're passive, or it's rushed, or you're just avoidant in general, you're unintentionally reinforcing the client's fears and maybe even enabling them instead of helping them move through it. But I get it, it's scary. And it's so scary that most coaches will try to avoid sales altogether. They'll do things like downplay their prices, not talk about money at all, make exceptions for every single client. They'll overcoach on the consultation to try to let the value speak for itself, or they'll just hope that the client will want it enough and say, hey, where do I buy? And they won't have to do the work. But that aversion towards quote unquote not being salesy will end up leaving the call with no real structure, no support, and no leadership. And avoiding sales altogether does not make it feel better or more comfortable. It just makes your process confusing, it makes it inconsistent, and harder for the client to say yes to what they want or need. Let me say that again in case that didn't hit where it needed to, okay? The clients who are on consultations with you, not free coaching sessions, okay? That's an entirely different podcast episode that I could get on a soapbox about. But the clients who are on a sales call with you, they either want or need what you have to offer. And it is your job on that call to help them make that decision, which is what takes me to point number one. Sales is a service. A sale is simply a structured conversation that helps someone access a solution that they want or need. And when you approach sales this way, both you and your client will feel better about the entire process. And I know this because I've been selling in some capacity for over 15 years. And for those of you that tune into this podcast, you might have heard me talk about this before, but I sold knives for almost a decade. It is how I paid for college and all of my schooling and all of my clinical training as a therapist. And in order for me to feel good about that, I needed to find a deeper meaning. I needed to find ways to facilitate those conversations that for me felt ethical, aligned, and helpful. And so I remember when I made the connection after having some really fun and extremely profitable sales appointments, that what I was actually doing was facilitating a conversation that answers questions, provides value, and supports someone in getting something they already want or need. And when you adopt this mindset, your coaching, your sales, and therefore your business all improve. In addition to this very important mindset around sales, I also wanted to give you a few more tangible tips that can help your sales process just feel better for both you and your clients. And I have 4 for you today. So let's go ahead and dive into sales tip number 1. You need to have a clear sales process. And if you've been in this industry for a while, this might sound like, do you know what your funnel is? Basically, that's the journey that a client goes on from first discovering you to hiring you. And for most people in this industry, especially if you're not spending a ton of money on ads or funnels or email campaigns or have a team, is they discover you in some capacity at an event, through a referral, or on social media. They book a call, they have that consultation, and then there's some type of onboarding system that ideally is clean, simple, and supportive. Now, think to yourself, Is that the case for you? Or is your sales process non-existent or extremely confusing because maybe there's too many steps or missing parts or obstacles or barriers or gaps in the steps to hire you where fear and resistance has the opportunity to creep in? And I talk about this inside of ASC a lot because structure creates safety. That's one of our core philosophies inside of our coaching framework. And that's not only true in your coaching programs, but it is also true in your coaching process. A structured sales process not only creates emotional safety, but that is going to result in increased conversions. Okay, let's talk about sales tip number 2, which is using a structured consultation, aka having an actual sales conversation. You cannot go into this conversation blind. I want you to think about it this way. Potential clients are coming to this call with a need or a desire, and they are hoping you can help. This is not grabbing a drink with friends or just vibing. We should be prepared and capable of facilitating a powerful conversation that's going to add value to that potential client and ideally help them decide on their next steps, whether that's with you or not. And inside of the Art and Skill of Coaching, I actually teach a very simple 4-step consultation process that you can use for any niche if you're a coach. And I actually recorded an entire podcast episode on it. So I'll make sure to go ahead and link the full episode in the show notes. But these 4 steps are crucial because a consultation, again, is not catching up with a friend, and it's also not a coaching session, all right? It is a sales conversation that includes discovery and decision-making. And that's why, really briefly, again, go check out that podcast episode. The 4 steps are connect, motivate, present, and decide. I definitely have seen a lot of consultations where they're connecting and maybe motivating, but because they're afraid of being salesy, they never present and they never help the client decide. And inside of my consult format, the call actually ends in a yes or a no. And this call is only 45 to 60 minutes. There is no thinking about it, follow-up calls, free coaching to see if you like it. And I know some of you might think that that's pushy or salesy, but I promise you this process is in service to the client and the coach. They're coming to these calls for help, and we should be prepared to do that. Which takes me to sales tip number 3. Include a true sales conversation. That first half of the consultation is connection and assessment. Again, connect and motivate. But the second half is a guided sales conversation where you actively help the client explore their desires, their obstacles, their fears, and their barriers to saying yes. And sometimes this is called, quote unquote, handling objections. Although what I like to call it is supporting them in saying yes to something they already want or need. Let me share a quick personal story with you guys. I remember I got on a call with a business coach who's recommended to me by a friend. And this was almost 10 years ago to the day. And we had a great conversation. It was fun. We vibed. I knew she could help me. And she told me the price of how much the program was, which my friend had taken. And I got scared. And I said, I love this. This sounds great, but let me think about it. And she was like, cool, just hit me up. Let me know when you're ready. And so we hopped off the phone. And guess what happened? I didn't think about it. I got off the call and then I tried to do things on my own, which I was already failing at, which is the reason I got on the call in the first place. And I continued to fail for a whole nother year. And then when I got on a call with her a year later, after failing for another 365 days and not making any money, the price went up $5,000. So as you can see, she crushed the first half of the call, but there was no second half. There was no presenting and deciding. And I wish she would have pushed me a little bit more on that first call or had the skills to navigate my objections, because I would have experienced success faster. And I would have saved $5,000 because I did end up hiring her. And thank God I did, because when I hired her that year, I went on to have my first 6-figure year as a coach, which takes me to tip number 4. Handle objections. I have audited sales calls for my coaches inside of the Art and Skill of Coaching, and it hurts me to see this when it happens, where they immediately get off the call the second they hear an objection, which is just a perceived barrier, an unevaluated fear, or some obstacle that could potentially be overcame with support that they just needed help figuring out so that they could say yes to something they already want and need. Do you hear the mindset? I am here on this call to help you make the most courageous and scary but beneficial and valuable decision that is best for you. Okay, not the easiest decision, but the best decision for you. And I'm going to give you a quick cheat sheet for handling objections on today's episode. So this is an area of improvement for you. Stay tuned. But first, let me tell you one of my favorite stories regarding handling objections. I will never forget this phone call. So a few years ago, when I say few, probably 6 years ago, I was looking to hire a coach because I was capped at about $100,000 every single year in my coaching business, which is such a blessing. And I worked really hard and I'm really grateful for it. But I wanted to get into the field of multiple six figures. And in my mind, I had a budget of $10,000. And so I found someone and I did a consultation with them and we had a great call. But then she not only connected with me and motivated me, but she presented to me her offer, which was $25,000. And get this, it was due up front and I had to pay in full. So what I did is I used my typical smokescreen objection of, I love this is amazing, just let me think about it and get back to you. And I try to hop off the call and she didn't let me. And she didn't do it in a pushy way, but basically all she asked me is, what do I need to think about? And that stopped me dead in my tracks. I was like, wait, what? No one had ever asked me that. I had never even asked myself that. And when I thought about it, I told her the truth. I said, you know what? I had a budget in my head of 10 grand and I really don't know if I want to spend that much money on a coach right now. And she asked me a few more questions and I can't even remember what the questions were per se, but I do remember exactly how I felt in that moment that eventually led me to saying yes on that call. I felt like she had expanded my brain and that I was thinking and feeling on a completely different level. And it was because she was helping me make a decision from who I said I needed to be and who I want it to be in order to hit my goals of breaking through that 100K year mark into multiple six figures versus making the same type of decisions with the same brain, the same mindset, the same fears, and the same limitations I usually do. And I talk about this consult a lot because that coaching wasn't even mind-blowing over the next 6 months, but that consult was. And that consult taught me more about how to make decisions and how to invest in myself, that consult alone was worth the $25,000. That coach's ability in 45 minutes to expand me and encourage me and believe in me and push me into who I was becoming on a consult, and the coaching didn't even start, was the first step in my growth that year. And I went on to break through to a new level in my business the following year, and we've grown every year since. So I promised a quick framework to handle objections, and here it is. So what you want to do is first clarify, then evaluate, and then ask again. We're going to go one by one. First, you want to clarify. You want to repeat back to them what their reason or their barrier is that's getting in the way of them saying yes. So ideally, you're taking notes during the consultation and you're repeating back to them word for word what they were saying, because what that's going to do is it's going to help them feel heard and it's going to give them an opportunity to say more versus becoming defensive. And this is as easy as asking, obviously, after you present, remember the 4 steps of a consult, what's coming up for you when you think about saying yes to this? Or, I hear you saying, and insert whatever their objection is, tell me more about that. Or what's making you feel like right now isn't the right time, or whatever else their objection is. By the way, the 2 biggest objections that you get initially are time and money, but rarely is it just time and money. More times than not, it's a lack of trust in them getting the result that they want or need. And it makes them question, is this going to be worth the time and money? And I say lack of trust because it's usually a lack of trust in themselves to follow through, to get the result and do the work, or they have a lack of trust in you and your ability to deliver that result. And that's why you want to move on to step 2, which is evaluate. This is where we gently explore the validity or the power the client is giving their reason for not saying yes to that coaching. And if they want to continue to operate in that way, we want to make sure that they feel in a position of choice, which is going to equate to a position of power. So this could sound something like, many people wait for the quote unquote perfect time, but we both know that that rarely arrives. So what would make right now the right time? Or I hear you saying that you need to think about it. I get that. So what do you think you need to think about? Or asking them, you've probably thought about this already. What comes up when you do? Get them to have that conversation with you versus with their own brain. Because if they have that conversation with their own brain off that call, they're going to come to the same decision that they've been coming to, which is the reason they're not getting the result. Now, this is important. This is a conversation, not a confrontation. And I hope you can hear that in some of the suggestions that I'm making. The confrontation is what makes sales icky. It creates defensiveness and a sense of superiority in the sales call that does not feel good. So make sure that you are clarifying and evaluating and asking questions that build understanding, that create clarity, and softly evaluate their shares so that they can make an empowered decision, not a familiar one. So after evaluation, then you want to ask again. You are inviting them to a new decision after hopefully a new perspective or mindset was created. And this could sound something like, when you picture prioritizing this, what shifts for you? Or with this new perspective, what would saying yes look like? Keep them in possibility, keep them in belief, keep them in power. And this is not about being pressureful, this is about leadership. As the coach, you are helping them make a decision that's aligned with their values, not their anxiety. And this is the power of a really good sales conversation. And when you can shift your mindset around sales and build structure into your process, clients are going to feel safer, your conversions are going to increase, your coaching relationships are going to be set on a strong foundation of trust and leadership and expansion. And you're going to be able to seamlessly support people in making that very first scary but courageous decision to embark on this growth journey. This is how sales become an ethical and an aligned extension of your coaching. And if you want support like this, the exact psychology and structure and skill set behind consultations, objections, marketing, onboarding, and obviously coaching, definitely check out the Art and Skill of Coaching. Some of you might not know this, but we actually spend the entire first month inside of our coaching program on our signature Business Basics Bootcamp. This is an entire month before we kick off our 6 months of advanced coach training, where you learn everything you need to improve and clean up your back office. So you will learn the business foundations and the advanced coaching skills you need to confidently sign clients and deliver real results. Enrollment actually opens soon, but for now you can join the waitlist. I'll throw the link in the show notes so that you can stay up to date on important announcements. So definitely check that out. And as always, I hope you found today's episode helpful. If so, definitely hit those 5 stars, leave us a review, and make sure to subscribe so that you never miss another training to help you master the art and skill of coaching.